And welcome back to the Sportsaholics podcast. I'm Danny Valle alongside Sean Conway and Max Zucker. And guys, I'm a big MLB fan. I'm not going to mince words here. I love the MLB, but this offseason was just some of the most boring, signings, or not signings, but like there's barely anything happening. You got two of the biggest free agents in history that won upwards of around $300 million. Teams these days make that. It's kind of like chump change to them. It's not chump change entirely, but I mean, it's enough to where they make enough to where they can pay players more. So this thing that the owners are doing, I don't know if it's a strategy or they just don't have the money to do it, which would be unfeasible to believe. It would be unbelievable.
Then don't own a team.
Yeah, like what are you guys doing? You guys are going into spring training, nearly going into spring training, and two of the biggest stars in baseball aren't signed. Bryce Harper doesn't have a team to go to. Manny Machado doesn't have a team to go to. Now, I know it shouldn't matter to a Cubs fan like me, but I mean, I'm a guy who loves baseball, and I know this is a thing owners do to try and get the best deal possible, but come on, man. I mean, you got to pay these guys what they're worth. I mean, I'm not impressed with any of these teams this season. No one's spending anything. No one's doing anything. There are very few teams that have, but that's my impression with the league. Sean, I'll start with you. What are there any teams in particular that haven't done much this offseason that you expected them to?
Guys, you guys won't really like who I'm picking here. I'm a White Sox fan, so I don't really want to. I want to see something like this, so it kind of makes me happy. But at the same time, it kind of, I just saw this young team up and coming. I thought it was going to be a dynasty, and they kind of look like they're just kind of sitting on the plateau. They're not going up anymore. They're just staying where they're at. They just missed the playoffs this season, and what they really needed, was a bullpen, and it wasn't, and all they've really they re-signed Cole Hamels on the $20 million option, and so that was a big move for them. But they also unloaded Drew Smiley, so they kind of equaled that out. So they're not really paying all that much, and then they like I said, they needed the bullpen strength, and all they really added was Brad Brock and Kendall Graveman for combined $9.9 million. So I don't know. It kind of feels to me that they haven't really been doing much. They got Daniel Descalso on a 2-year, $5 million contract. That'll be a good replacement in the infield for Addison Russell. But they like you said, they didn't really have any big moves. They have no intentions of pursuing a Harper or a Machado. We haven't really heard any news about where Craig Kimbrell's growing, but they needed a bullpen, and that would probably be the biggest piece to pull up in a bullpen, I would say. And they have pulled no triggers this offseason. It's kind of upsetting, even as a White Sox fan.
Yeah, and a lack of a big name too, that kind of deteriorates the offseason too. Lack of big name signings. Max, I know you have another team that you weren't impressed with, also a Central team, but from the opposite side of the league.
Yeah, guys, I'm a little disappointed in the Minnesota Twins. You look at this, their biggest contract, $23 million to Joe Mauer, just got off the books since he finally retired from Major League Baseball. And this is a team that has no money. After this season, they literally have like $5 or $8 million committed to next year's payroll. They have tons of money. I would think they would be the team to go after a guy like a Craig Kimbrell and a Machado or Harper. I mean, Minnesota needs a franchise cornerstone player. They don't have a lot. So for them to be cheap like this is inexcusable. I mean, you're telling me that I know C.J. Cron is an okay player. He had 30 home runs and 74 last year, RBIs last year, and Nelson Cruz, Jonathan Shoup, they brought in too to add a little bit more power. I don't think that's substantial enough, especially again when Harper and Machado are still on the market. And Blake Parker to start closing games, no, that's a no-go there. And then their one addition to their rotation, which if you look at it at hand is not it's not too bad with Jose Barrios, Jake Odorizzi, and Kyle Gibson. You would thought they might have gone after like a Keuchel here. No, instead they get Martin Perez, who had an ERA of 6.22 last year. It floors me. And then earlier this week, they bring back Mike Olt from the dead practically. This guy hasn't played baseball since 2015. I don't see it, guys. I just don't. I think the Twins should have spent money on a starter, a closer, and added one of the 2 or 3 premium bats on the market, and they have done no such thing.
Well, we are 3 weeks away from spring training, 21-ish days out. Before we go into the teams that have impressed you this season, quick note, since we are talking about free agency, all-star third baseman Nolan Arenado, 1-year deal with the Rockies. He agreed to that on Thursday. It's for $26 million. That sets a record for 1 year's salary for arbitration-eligible player, and one of the best two-way players in the game. He's won Gold Gloves in his first 6 years, and he's finished in the NL MVP voting top 5 in the past 3 years. So the Rockies there getting a good signing. So other teams that have impressed you guys, Max, I'm going to start with you.
I gotta say that I'm pretty impressed by the New York Mets this year. They get a new general manager in Brodie Van Wagenen. And he had the biggest choice of the offseason, and that was to ship out his trio of pitchers and start a massive rebuilding Queens, or keep those 3 pitchers and add and build around them. And they're keeping those 3, so they're going to keep Zach Wheeler, Thor, and DeGrom, who won the NL Cy Young last year, and they added some offense too. They added Jed Lowry on a 2-year deal. They added Wilson Ramos, who's to me one of the more premier catchers, one healthy. But those were 2 good deals. Obviously, the big trade to get in Robbie Cano. He's got that New York familiarity with playing in the Bronx. I thought that was a good upgrade. And look at the way they upgraded their bullpen, guys. You add Edwin Diaz in that Cano trade. That guy was probably the best relief pitcher in Major League Baseball last year. Definitely top 3. Jeurys Familia, who used to close games for the Mets, was even their closer when they went to the World Series in 2015. They signed him to a 3-year deal to set up for Diaz. And even Justin Wilson isn't a terrible signing. They needed to add a veteran lefty to that pen, and Wilson foot the bill. So if anything, I'm impressed that they did not ship their big 3, and I think Brodie Van Wagenen has the team in the right direction. And don't forget, gentlemen, Tim Tebow is a non-roster spring training invitee this year. So that's big news.
Maybe we'll see Tim Tebow making his debut this season. You got to hope for it. That's just content to talk about. Well, you like the Mets, Danny. Max, I got to say that I liked what the Yankees have done this offseason. They went in, all they really needed was pitching, because they already had all the bats with Stanton and Judge. I mean, that's why they were their offense was one of the main reasons why they were as good as they were last year. And the only reason why they were number 1 in the division is because they were going up against the Red Sox. So they already had the offense, they just needed the pitching. They re-signed J.A. Happ and CC Sabathia. They backed that up with a good bullpen with James Paxton and Adam Ottavino, Zach Britton. That'll pair nicely with Aroldis Chapman. That makes quite possibly one of the scariest bullpens of all time. And the Yankees, they have more to spend. So they're going to be a scary team next year, just like they were a scary team this year. But now they're going to have both offense and a defense to back it up. I think that the Yankees, they might be the World Series champions next year to stay in the AL East.
That's a great prediction there. I mean, obviously, when you're competing with the Red Sox, who win 108 games, Sean, you alluded to all those points. They need to gain back some of that pitching, and they did so in an affordable way. It will be fun to see that AL race between the Yankees and Red Sox this year, as it is obviously baseball's best rivalry. All right, guys, let's take a quick break here, and on the flip side of this break, I'll propose my trivia question to you scoundrels, and Sean will have his drink of the week, and Danny will tell us what's trending right now, as you guys are listening to the Sportsaholic podcast with Max Zucker, Sean Conway, and Danny Valle.